So all you guys that want to dunk on us for owning Volkswagens, well, I'm going to give you a good reason. Just sounds like Dad and Mom got some mechanical issues and I got to go rescue them at the parking lot. Well, this is going to be fun. Not the video I had intended for today. Definitely a water pump. Well, we got it back there loaded up, and I'm gonna take it home and fix it. Roads are so rough, I think it's gonna wear out the hips on the hula girl. This is about the easiest recovery mission I've had. I've got her unchained. I'm gonna back it off the trailer and get it inside so I can get it on the lift. I'm gonna pull the belly pan off and let it run for a minute and see where it leaked. One thing about it, these modern cars are pretty easy to rack on the lift. The hardest things that I actually own to rack is like my Bronco. Honestly, the Bronco's probably the worst. I don't think I've complained about the heat yet today. It's hot. First things first, let's get this guard off of here. Now see dripping off of this hose right here. I think while we're at it, I'm gonna take the wheel off. I'll take this mud shield inside of here, out of here, and that'll give me a little better view of what's going on inside of there. I'm gonna get it up in the air. I'm gonna fire it up, and we're gonna see if we can see where it's leaking. There's some coolant there. Coolant all over the front of the engine. What we have here is a failure to communicate where you're leaking. We got an active leak. I should be able to spot it now. It is up there. It is. It's the thermostat housing. There's no doubt in my mind it's the water pump. So there's two methods to get to that water pump thermostat housing up there. And one is to come up from underneath. And I'm fortunate enough that I have a lift and I could do that. But I don't think that's the method I'm going to go for. The other method is a lot of labor. It is not going to be easy. But it's basically going in from the top and taking the whole front of the intake manifold off. This is another first for me. I'm not afraid to tear into it. Yeah, I'm going to do stuff wrong. Yeah, I'm not going to do stuff the way Volkswagen does it. But I'm going to do it. So let's get started. My first step when I do any work in an engine compartment, especially opening up cavities, is to blow everything off with compressed air. You can see there's a lot of dust and dirt accumulated in here that when I take the intake manifold off, I don't want falling into sensitive components. Yes, I did disconnect the battery before I started. Start by taking the sensor off here. Push down, push in, pull. There's a bolt back there that I think is a T25 Torx I need to take off. I'm going to need to take these clamps off here and scoot this back so we can get this air box out of here. There's two tiny clips on here, and these are easily broken. Pull this off. This should pull out. And you can see how fragile some of these parts are. This clamp back here, out of the way. And it can live there for the time being. Pull this off, and I'm going to plug that up because I don't want anything getting in the intake of my engine. That'll do. And this should pull out of here. There's a little grommet down here, and these are just kind of a friction fit. And there it goes. Okay. Now we can get this out of here. Before I get too far, I'm going to show you all what we're after. And this is the water pump. The thermostat housing is right here. You can barely see the thermostat inside of there. There's a new thermostat, which may have been what failed. There's a new sensor on here. It already has the new gasket, which is incorporated, which is a failure point on the Volkswagen ones. Now, this is not an OEM. This is a graph. I have OEM parts for everything else, but I wanted to replace the plastic one from the Volkswagen with a good, high quality aluminum water pump. Next, I'm going to take off the EGR. Now, if any of you were with me for the Audi timing belt that I did, it's the same sort of principle with these connectors. You press on these parts here that are kind of serrated, you press them together and it should pull off. Got that off. I've already released the one on the other side down here on the manifold. Now, a lot of people take this loose, but I'm going to see if I can get away with just pulling this out of these clips here and sticking it up here behind another electrical fitting right here. I need to unplug. I'm going to take this little connector off here. I don't know if I need to. It might stay with it anyway. And pull this clamp off of here and get this hose up out of the way too. And that one I'll just tuck back away over there. And that line just sits in a clip right here on the top of the valve cover. So let me take this off here and see if that helps. Okay, alright. Now I might be able to get better access to this. And yes, there we go. Looks like down under there, there's what looks like maybe a fuel line right there. I'm going to get a line wrench and see if I can get that nut off of there. Alright, fortunately, it's not super tight. I'm used to D4s. Nothing on here is as tight as a D4. I need to pull this little vacuum line right here apart. That's it. All I gotta do, pull it apart. What's so hard about this, Aaron? You can do this. There we go. At least for me, mechanic work is just making room to get to things. Looks like this wire goes down here to this connector. So we're going to unplug this one as well. It looks like these are T30s, and there's those silver ones right there. And there's some down below that look like, I think they're hard to see, but there's like a 10 millimeter nut. And when I go back on, I'm not going to use this speed electric wrench because a lot of these need to be torqued very precisely. So we got to be very careful. And those aren't captured, they pull out. They're quite a long bolt, actually. Let's get this one out right here. Getting this one from under here, I just know it's going to be one of those days when I have to break out the 1/4 inch drive stuff. That's the screw. And there's two right here that hold this bracket on with these connectors. I don't know that I need to take those loose, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. The hardest part of this is holding the camera for you guys while I try to maneuver everything with one hand. Alright, that'll hang out of the way. And then I need to get in through here. There's two 10 millimeter nuts on studs. Before I go that far, I'm going to loosen this clamp right here on the intake. And it's interesting to know there's witness marks on here, so I think somebody had already been in here. This is a 7 millimeter. And as frustrating as this may seem, it's really not that bad. It's just a lot of stuff to take apart. And I recall some Chrysler engines that actually have the water pump inside the engine. You have to pull the engine out of the car to change the water pump. Up next, we're going to get the nuts off the bottom studs that hold the manifold. There's a groove cut out in the manifold right here where my flashlight is. And we are after that nut back there. Hopefully you can see it on the camera. 10 millimeters seems to fit it. That is the one nice thing about everything around it being plastic. So there it is. Got another one to get out right back there. I did take the rest of this air box off of here. There's two screws, one here and one here. I'm going to go ahead and unscrew this a little bit too. I can put that bracket back on later. There's two bolts that are the T30 Torxes down in here I still need to get to. It looks like I'm going to have to take these wire clips off there. And off of here. And push that wire harness down there so I can get in through there to get to them. So you could definitely see you're going to need a 1/4 inch drive to get back in there. And I'm not sure if you can see through that little hole right there. That's where the wrench is. That's where the bolt goes. So this is definitely a tedious process. This next one's the same way. You got to sneak it in right here above there. And to line it up, There's no way you guys are going to be able to see it good, but to line it up, you have to move this fuel line either up or down. I think we're going to be right there below it. At this point, I think I'm going to remove the oil filter. There's just not going to be enough room to get that intake manifold out without removing it. And there's some connectors I'm probably going to have to take loose once I get this up and out of there, but I think it's just going to take a pretty decent yank, a careful yank, to get it off of there, because those injectors, they seat in there pretty good with a really tight O-ring. There we go, and I've got my hose down here already loose. There we go. I can see where the water pump failed right away. I'm going to go ahead and pull this sensor wire off of that. I have a few more wire harness clips to get right here. This is a lot different than I thought it was actually going to come out with the wiring harness. One injector stayed inside the engine. These are actually pretty easy to unclip. Just like all the Volkswagen fittings, Audi, you push it in, there's a little bitty tab out here on the end, and you press that in and it pulls out. This is your fuel injection wiring harness, so I'm gonna set that aside for now. And this is the green one I just took out of that clip. Common point of failure with these water pumps, you could see that crack right there where it's popped up. And what happens on some of these water pumps, the plastic ones, is you have a little bit of seepage that can come out of the valve cover gasket. That oil runs down there, it softens up and expands that O-ring inside that housing and bursts it out, just like what happened here. So there's not a doubt in my mind that that's what caused this leak. Pull this hose off of here. That'll keep most of it out for now. Okay, I got to take a bunch of stuff apart. I'm going to get a pan under the car because there's going to be some water in this next step. We need to remove this hose here that goes into the water pump right there. And this hose and the one down here. Should be able to just pull this one out with a screwdriver, just like so. Now that'll pull off of there. Take this wire clip off of here for the harness. See, we got another one down here. Those are zip tied on there. But this should slide off of here. Push that little tab out. There we go. And that'll get this whole harness out of our way. Keep forgetting I got these beauties for those hose clamps. Now I just need to pop this loose and pop this one loose. Got this hose off. This one should, now that I've gotten it unclipped, it should come right off the water pump. Yeah. And my pan should be catching everything under there. There's a T30 Torx underneath here connected. The screw goes through this hose going over to here. If I get that out of there, and then I can pull this off. Should be an O-ring that, yep, there we go. Might be able to just swivel this out of the way. That'll work. Now I got to take this guard off the back of the water pump. There's a, looks like a T30 there, T30 there. One more hose clamp to pull out, and it's another one of those wires that fits in the groove, just like this one. There we go. That actually went a lot better than I thought it was going to. Alright, let's get that hose off of here. There's a belt on here I need to remove. Belt that drives the water pump off of what they call the balancing shaft, I believe. Okay, we got that belt slipped off of there. Now, this has got to come out this way as I bring it out. There's a couple of dowel pins up here that are real critical when we go back on with the new one. And then there's a coupling that goes in here to this cooler. There we go. So next I need to get this bolt off the end of here so I can get this belt off of here. And that is a left-handed thread bolt. I've got a breakover bar, half-inch drive breakover bar, and a 24mm socket on the crank so I could hold it to break this loose. And there is no other way to do it. It is a, yeah, And I just can't get used to turning a bolt that direction. It's just driving me nuts. And actually, I'm going to take this bolt out. The kit's got a new one, and I've kind of marred this one up. The funny thing about this is, another couple of millimeters in the casting difference on the engine block, this wouldn't be a problem. But here we are. It's just kind of tapered there. That's it. Always compare my new parts. There's the old one that's kind of got some marred up around the edges. Here's the new one. They're exactly the same. And it's kind of, I don't know, tapered. And that taper fits on this taper. And there's a taper on the end of the balance shaft. And it's just a press fit, friction fit. That's it. I have absolutely no way to torque this. And I don't want to over torque it. That's a small bolt. And the last thing I want to do is break it off in the end of this balance shaft. So, let's put a little Loctite on there and get it in there. Most importantly, we don't want to forget to put our belt on here first, because you don't want to have to take this off again. This is so weird. Turning that bolt backwards. Yes, this is a genuine VW Audi belt. But I'm going to go ahead and snug this up off camera, because it's pretty hard to get you guys in there to see anything. Okay, everything's snugged up. I've got the new belt in there. I guess I need to clean up these mating surfaces where the water pump goes. They're kind of dirty, especially where it was leaking. I think that's fairly clean. I've cleaned around these dowels here. These are very important. Let's put the water pump on, and I'm going to use the new bolts that came with the kit. Up next, we have this little spacer thing, and I'm going to put a little bit of engine assembly lube, just a dab. That's going to go on there, and then that's going to slide into there. And you got to make sure you get your O-ring in there good, because these edges of this cooler, they're kind of sharp. Got the water pump here. I'm going to put a little bit of lube on these O-rings, just a dab. I might need to get the belt on first. This is, I don't know. We'll see. This thing looks like it can come out and maybe rock forward. Maybe I'll put it in the water pump first. There we go. Alright. There. It should fit up easy. It went right in those dowels. I've got my belt on. Everything looks like it's where it should be. These new bolts are a 4mm hex. Don't ask me why. Everything's snug. Let's torque it down. Everything's torqued, and I'm guessing that the tension on that belt is preset by the distance. I can put my guard back on. We don't want to forget the longer screw that goes down here in the bottom. Pull this lower radiator hose up here. Now there's O-rings in there, and I thought about replacing them, but the kit did not come with them, so we're just going to put that back up there and hook it back up, hopefully. And it's going to be a little tight. There's an O-ring on it. There we go. And that should lock it back in. There we go. O-ring in there looks good. Hopefully they are okay. I didn't damage anything taking it off. There we go. Nice tight fit. Snap that in there. Okay, this is an O-ring we did get, so I am going to take it out of here and replace it. I got a little bit of lube on there, and we'll put that on. And I should be able to twist this right there. And slide that in, hopefully. There we go. T30 right here that goes in underneath and screws into the water pump. Tighten that thing up. Of course, we got another one right here. Before I forget, I need to move this clamp back up here on the hose. So you can see in there the valves, and Allegedly, the dealer charged them $2,800 to do a new manifold, one injector, and a carbon clean. You can really see a lot of buildup on the top of those valves. I'm going to hook up this hose next. When I took this intake manifold out, I was kind of shocked. There's supposed to have been, I think, a bracket that goes down there onto the engine block and up to the intake manifold. I could be wrong on this model. It may not have it, but there's provisions for it, and there was nothing on there. The wiring harness clipped onto this hose right here, so I'm going to install that clip, and I'm going to run the wiring harness across down here like it was. I'm going to clean this up and we'll put it on next. And I'm going to leave those clamps loose for now. I'll leave them on there, but I'll leave them loose because until I get the intake manifold on there, I don't want them tight. I'm going to leave the injector that stayed in the engine alone, but while these are up here, I'm going to gently clean the ends of these off. I'm going to pull them out. I'm going to put a little bit of Marvel Mystery Oil on these O-rings here and put them into the head. This little clip just kind of sits on top of the injector. Kind of a guide, it looks like, and it gives it a little bit of spring tension from the top to hold it in. I've gently cleaned the tip of this injector with a little bit of carb cleaner. I don't want to get too carried away. Those tiny holes in there are really easy to plug up. And I'm going to put just a drop of Marvel Mystery Oil on that, and we'll go ahead and put it back in the car. Keep this very clean in here. So these injectors go a specific way here. Just like that. And they'll dog ear into this little notch out right here. So you can only get them one way. And when we put the intake manifold on, I'm going to make sure I put a little bit of oil on these O-rings up at the top. We're going to clean this off with some solvent. Those are just these little gates right here. I don't know what you call them. But we're going to go ahead and clean them up before we put the intake manifold back on. I found more broken things, more clips, little tabs that were broken, and it's obvious because they're covered in dirt and grease. The injector wire harness, there's the mounts for it. So it looks like they actually just cut them off, but you can see they were already cut off because there's dirt and everything, and you can see it looks like they took some in-naps in there to just cut it. I'm bewildered. I'm going to start plugging things in, and this is our water temperature sensor. Wiring harness is going to lay just like this, and I'm going to plug in the injectors. Listen for that click on each one. Now's a good time to make sure that all your fittings for the wires are in the block in the proper location, and you can start plugging those in as well. Now when we get everything installed with the intake, I can put this bracket up there and bolt it back up to the bottom. Let's get our manifold ready. Remove the manifold gasket, and there's little tabs in here so you can just pull them out. All these are original Volkswagen parts that I'm using, except for the water pump. That's the aftermarket Graph that's all aluminum. Money well spent, and actually it was cheaper than an OEM plastic Volkswagen pump. The new one's going to go in just like the old one came out. And there's that tab there you can line up. And if you do this job, you definitely want to replace this. And I'm not a mechanic. This is not advice. I'm a heavy equipment operator, and this is for entertainment purposes only. Now's a good time to make sure everything's nice and clean. Where the injector ports, the injectors install. Put a drop of Marvel Mystery Oil on each one of these O-rings on the injectors. Oop, a drop. And I think that Two of these injectors were recently replaced. I'm not sure which ones, and you can tell by the color of the insert in the inside. There it goes. And what you're hearing click back here, that's the fuel line going to the fuel pump, getting into place. Now everything's good and lined up and in place. The injectors have seated. I'm definitely going to start all these bolts before I tighten anything down. Got all the bolts dropped in up here. I've got these two down here in the bottom and the middle. They're kind of hard to get to. So for that, I'm going to be using this little claw machine thing. Found that the best way to get these in here is actually coming from the top. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. And that way I can start that bolt with my claw. There we go. And you can see it fell right in there. The nuts that go on those studs right there, they're a little easier to get to from the outside. Got all the bolts started in here. Now I just need to torque them down. I'm going to start this nut for the high pressure side of the fuel system on the pump. I can't find torque specs for this manifold, so I'm going to do the same torque as I did on the water pump. It was 9 Newton meters. I'm going to start in the middle and work outward each direction. These bolts are the same size as the ones that went in the water pump, plus they're going into an aluminum head, so I don't want to overdo it. There's a little connector down here we want to make sure that we get. It's kind of in a precarious little place to get to. Got to get this fitting underneath the manifold. This is a tough one. That one is down in there. This one here, it's a 3-prong connector. I need to feed it up through here. That wire goes through this little clip here, and that snaps in there, into there. And this wire here, it's going to go down here, and it's going to plug into the bottom of the filter housing down here. Plug our fuel line back in here and put our clamp back up here. And I don't think that it was necessary to take this off, but it definitely was helpful to get to those bolts underneath. And it clicks in. Before I go any further, I'm going to stick the oil filter on here to keep dirt out. Now we can bring this line down here, and it can go back to live where it was. Clip our PCV valve back in here. One hose here to hook up a vacuum line. Make sure we get that. I'm going to snug up the clamps on the intake pipe here. Now I'm going to put this bracket up here. There's that bolt here and that one that goes in here up from the bottom. Up next, we got to put our bracket that holds our wiring harness clips. We still have these wire connectors up here in the front. One going down here. One more electrical connector, and this one is right here. And it sweeps around the back of right down in there. Got one more thing. The vacuum, I think it is, goes up here. Let's put the intake on. Okay, let's get some water in it. I'm monitoring the water and glycol, and so far so good. Don't see any leaks under here. I'd like to get the thermostat to open up before I button everything up and am positive about it. Dad's gonna drive. We're gonna do the Butterfinger run and give this a test drive. No leaks. Everything seems okay. I got the Victory Butterfinger, so I do want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. And I'm gonna tell Dad to get new tires for Mom. We're German Swiss. We're good, but I gotta say, this is Germany engineering saying we must engineer a complicated solution for this simple problem. Far from what I had planned for us today, folks. But if you read the channel description, you're just along for the ride.